Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Pangolin Advisor and welcome to another video featuring BunnyQueen's Warhammer 2 tournament, and another best of 3 awaits us today between Mist and Geraldo. For those of you who did not watch the previous video of the series, here are the rules of the tournament. Feel free to pause the video and read them, because I will not wait anymore. I want to see what games there are in store for me today. Let's get right to it, shall we? For our first fight in this best of 3 series, we have Mist playing as the High Elves facing off against Geraldo playing as the Empire. Now this is still round of 16, so we're quite far away from the finals, but I do hope it's going to be a fun match, and looking at the armies for both players, they seem to be well-composed competitive armies, so let's talk a little bit more about them before we got right into the meat of it. So firstly, we've got the Pyramid Company for the High Elves, which are Regiment of Renown Wild Lions of Chance. So we've seen the Wild Lions of Chance before. They're very fun, great axe infantry. Those guys, however, have armor sundering, which lowers the armor of enemy units, which is a fun unit to have. Honestly, I prefer to have them in my second line of attack, but on this map I suppose it will do to have them at the front. 2 units of Spearmen and a unit of Swords Masters of Hoev. They are an absolutely amazing greatsword infantry, way stronger than the greatsword infantry for the Empire, and they're going to tear those guys to shreds if they are allowed to do that. Next up, we have 4 units of archers for the High Elves. They're extraordinarily cost effective. They cost very little and they can kill a lot with their volleys, if they are allowed to do that, of course. They are very vulnerable up close, as most archers are. Next up, we've got Lord Teclis leading the High Elves. He who has, I can see the Net of Armagnac, or however you're supposed to pronounce it, as well as a variety of other spells such as Regrowth and the Enfeebling Force. So a combination of debuffs, healing spells. The Net of Armagnac, very cool ability, allowing the archers to focus fire on a chosen target. 2 units of Spearmen to guard the rear for the High Elves, and 2 Nobles. They are a very good choice against the Empire, since they can just tear the Empire's large cavalry to shreds. Even if they are armored, again, they have armor piercing, so they are a very fun choice. They are kind of like assassins, except for High Elves, I suppose. I like having them. And finally, the Fireborn, which are a Regiment of Renown unit of Dragon Princes. Absolutely amazing riders. They have no match on the battlefield, and they will be very difficult for the Empire to get rid of. Now, for the Empire, actually, wait a second, I spy one more High Elf unit, which is cheekily deployed in the forest behind the enemy lines, that being Illyrian Reavers, just to be a bit of a nuisance for the Empire. I like this idea, having a bit of a tricky thing and store for the enemy. Now, as for the Empire, 3 units of Spearmen with shields, good idea against the High Elves. The High Elves do tend to have strong cavalry, Spearmen are good against that, and with the shields, they will not die so easily to the enemy missile fire either. 2 units of Great Swords, which, as I said, are not quite as good as the Sword Masters of Hoev, but otherwise they will be able to quite efficiently cut down the High Elves. Next up, we've got Karl Franz. So the great lord indeed. He's an amazing duelist, and if he is allowed to, he should be able to just tear Teclis to shreds. Finally, we've got 2 units of crossbowmen to provide some archer support for the Empire, and Jade Wizard, who is going to heal up the Empire armies. A very fun addition for the Empire army. And finally, on the flanks, we've got on the right flank and on the left flank, it seems like there are mirrored units. So on each flank, we've got a unit of Spearmen, a unit of Demigryph Knights with Halberds, and a unit of Outriders. So Outriders, again, they're there to just pester the High Elves with some armor-piercing missiles, going to be good against units, heavily armored units of the High Elves. And finally, the Demigryph Knights with Halberds, they are the cavalry of choice for the Empire. They can just tear through everything there is, be that enemy large unit, armored units, or even infantry themselves. The Demigryph with Halberds have such amazing stats, they should do just fine against the enemy infantry as well. There are just very few matchups that are bad for them, but one such matchup is a matchup against the Fireborn. The Fireborn should do quite well against Demigryphs with Halberds, unless they're attacked by both Demigryphs at the same time. But without further ado, let's jump into the regular speed. So far, no very aggressive movements from either player. It seems like they're just positioning their armies closer to the center of the battlefield. The Elves kind of holding the line, but now moving forward, trying to get in range of the enemy army. And if you can see on this white background, there is the firing arc for the High Elf archers, and the High Elf have superior range to the Empire crossbowmen, which are also deployed at the back of the enemy formation, so the Empire has to advance or give ground. But the rules of this tournament do stipulate that you have to advance towards the middle, otherwise, well, you're disqualified, so the Empire will have to attack sooner or later. Right now, the High Elves are just taking comfortable position at the center of the area, and they're deploying the spearmen to guard the flanks, more spearmen to guard the rear of the formation, and yeah, they're sitting very comfortably in a box formation of sorts. And now the initiative falls to the Empire to crack this. The Outriders should already start moving in, I suppose, as should the Demigryph Knights, but right now it seems like the Empire is just getting ready to attack. Bold move to move High Wizard in first. Maybe he's trying to tank some damage, some initial damage, and just make sure that the spearmen aren't peppered with arrows too much, but I'll certainly make sure that the Wizard is kept in the back, because this guy, I mean, look at the amount of damage he's taking from the arrows already. And there are a bunch of spearmen that also got caught in this, and this net of Amniak has been triggered, and this Jade Wizard is not in a good spot. He needs to start healing himself ASAP and then get out of here as soon as the net is down, but he's oh no, he's routed already. This is a devastating loss for the Empire. Meanwhile, the Empire is trying to engage the Elves on all sides. The spearmen are fighting against the spearmen. I would love to send in some great swords in here, also cavalry to help deal with this. Meanwhile, the Demigryph Knights with halberds, they are engaging against the Dragon Princes. This is a bad engagement for them. The nobles are here as well. They're going to tear the Demigryph Knights to shreds. They need to run away from here. Demigryph Knights are too valuable to lose like this. Karl Franz is trying to help them in some way, but he's unable to do so just yet. The Empire is collapsing on the enemy, and those crossbowmen, they are firing, it looks like, at the Sword Masters of Hoeth. Except I don't see them firing, but I imagine that's just because of the white background. And we can see a Phoenix just roasting a bunch of spearmen to shreds, and those Outriders, they need to help with the rear engagement. Oh no, I missed this. Karl Franz dived in on Teclis, but now he's surrounded, and he fell already. That was so fast. Karl Franz fell to the Dragonborn and the Nobles. As I said, Nobles very good assassin-like units for the High Elves, and with no legendary lord, the Empire is in... This is just a full nightmare scenario for the Empire. They cannot hold their ground. They're routing on all fronts. I cannot blame them for losing the Lord so fast. The Demigryph Knights, they have engaged again. They were, I suppose, trying to save their Lord, but there is nothing to be done. They need to run, because right now they will be just picked apart by the superior High Elf forces. And the Empire cannot push through the front lines of the High Elves either, because they did not have the cavalry support or the Lord support. The Lord needed to clear out the Wild Lions or send in the cavalry to do that, but that didn't happen, and that was a very decisive victory for the High Elves. Very well done by them, just luring Karl Franz into the fray and trying to power in on him and just snapping the enemy very quickly. That was an unexpected thing to watch, honestly. Very few losses on both sides. It was just a very quick, precise attack on the Empire front, just snapping those two key units, and after that everybody just routed, seeing that the most important units, that being the Lord, the Jade Wizard, and the Great Sword, were routed without much effort. The Demigryph Knights of Halberds, they also heavily underperformed by going against the fearsome Fireborn, backed up by a bunch of spearmen and the nobles as well. So a bunch of very unfortunate matchups for the Empire. Now, in theory, on the front and the flanks, the Empire should have won, because they had a nice little conclave going for themselves, surrounding the High Elf units. Of course, the Swordmasters of Hoeth, they needed to be attacked by the Empire cavalry or by Karl Franz himself, because otherwise they just had a field with the enemy units. But other than that, the Empire should have done nicely, but they were just routed away before anything could happen. So that's what happened over there. Very good reaction from Mist, just piling in on the enemy critical units as soon as they became vulnerable. That's what won him the game. So without further ado, let's move on to game number 2. Now, for our second match, Mist is going to lead the Empire, so switching roles I see, while Geraldo is leading the Dark Elves, and those seem to be fairly interestingly composed armies. That's a new way of saying this. So let's analyze them ASAP as soon as we load and start with the Empire again. So we've missed going first. We've got 2 units of Demigroove Knights with halberds, and are there any more? There's 1 more unit of Demigroove Knights with halberds. Very good competitive choice. Those guys are the backbone of any good Empire army in my opinion. Next up we've got 2 units of Spearmen, then 2 units of Great Swords, 2 units of Great Swords and Sigma Sons. Now Sigma Sons are amazing swordsmen because they are unbreakable, so they'll fight until the bitter end no matter what happens. Then 1 more unit of swordsmen, 1 more unit of great swords, so very wide line for the Dark Elves to march, then some more spearmen, and finally the silver bullets. So honestly, this is something that in my opinion the Empire lacked in the previous engagement. The Empire needed to have some silver bullets against the highly resistant units. Silver bullets just could tear them to shreds from a high vantage point, and the Empire did have advantage in the previous engagement like this. And the Sigma Sons, I just don't like Outriders all that much. They cost as much as Sigma Sons, and Sigma Sons, in my opinion, are way more cost effective. But enough about the previous game. Let's keep talking about this one. We've got the Witch Hunter as well. He's very good missile specialist with his accusation. He should do quite alright against Malekith, who is riding his Black Dragon as he often does. So Witch Hunter is going to be on the lookout for that. And finally we've got Balthazar Gelt. So a strong spellcaster rider with Final Transmutation, an incredibly potent spell that would devastate the enemy army, especially when overcast. But we're going to see how well it is used once it comes to that. Now for the Dark Elf army, we've got 3 units of Dread Spears, just your regular spear infantry, but you know, there's no regular when we talk about the Dark Elves. Dark Elves are very strong in their own right. And 2 more units of Dread Spears, so a wide line of Dread Spears protecting the flanks for the Dark Elves, making sure that the Empire cannot outrun them and outflank them, because the Dark Elves prefer to be the flankers, not the Empire. I mean, the Empire obviously wants to flank as well, but Dark Elves are just specialists at flanking. 2 units of Haganef Executioners, again, they are way stronger than the Great Swords for the Empire, and Haganef Executioners are just going to have a field day with whatever is on foot for the Empire. They're going to tear it to shreds. And finally, the Witch Elves. I really love the inclusion of Witch Elves into any Dark Elf army, because they can cause but rampage on any enemy unit, forcing that unit to attack the nearest enemy target. They're very fun when used against, for instance, the enemy cavalry after they engage. This makes it impossible for the enemy to disengage, allowing the Witch Elves and other units to pin them down and finish them off. Next up we've got 2 units of Dark Shards, very efficient archers. They have short range but very powerful missiles. 2 units of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. Again, very fun flanking cavalry. They'll be able to pester the Empire to no end. I love using them as well. Finally, 1 unit of Cold One Dread Knights. They are going to be fairly effective. They do have Primal Instinct, so it's going to be tricky for Geraldo to make sure that they do not go into rampage themselves, but they should trade pretty well in their own right no matter what happens. And finally, unless they're caught by Demigroove Knights, of course, in which case they will not trade well at all. And finally we've got the Malekith himself, riding his magnificent Black Dragon, where it looks like True Wind and Soul Stealer. That's how it's called, right? Soul Stealer? Let me just confirm that. Yes, Soul Stealer, I was correct. And of course, Gaze of Malice it looks like, and Noxious Breath rather, Spiteful Conjuration, so all of the good stuff. He's going to be delivering a lot of area effect damaging spells on the enemy. Both armies have a wildly different idea. So the Dark Elf army, they have a bunch of chaff protecting some elite units, whereas the Empire, they have a very long line of mid-of-the-line, strong but not the best, the most elite units. So the Empire clearly trying to have a wider line than the Dark Elves and are probably going to try to encircle the Dark Elves. So let's see how well the Empire can execute that. So the silver bullets have been revealed, and they're going to chase Malekith away, because Malekith does not want to be attacked by the silver bullets. He can take quite a bit of damage from them. The Witch Hunter also guarding the flank, and I can see the Spearman advancing. Not sure if this is just to deter any Dark Rider action or to just try to lure the enemy in. But the Spearmen, they actually have no shields, so they can be picked apart quite easily by the Dark Riders. They want the Dark Riders to come to them, not the other way around. The Empire is advancing, probably a good idea since the Dark Elves do have advantage at range in this specific matchup. The Empire only has the Silver Bullets and the Witch Hunter that can fire from range, and of course the Wizard if we count that as a ranged unit. And I believe we should. Balthazar Geld, clearly not something that you want to throw in melee combat, so the Empire is advancing. They want to advance as quickly as possible, because again the advantage otherwise lies with the Dark Elves and Demigryph Knights attacking Dread Spears that were not braced, so Dread Spears took a lot of charge damage over here. But Demigryph Knights do not want to fight the Dread Spears. They will do okay against Dread Spears, those are Demigryph Knights with halberds after all, but they should be used to chase down, hunt down and kill the Dark Riders, although it would be difficult considering Dark Riders' superior speed of course. But either way, fighting against the Cauldron Dread Knights is a far better idea, especially with the support of the other Demigryph Knights with halberds, and the final transmutation is popped, delivering massive damage, and this flank for the Dark Elves is collapsing as we speak. Meanwhile, the other sides have also been engaged. As you can see, the Witch Elves have triggered the rampage on those great swords. They're gonna be stuck in here, but now the Silver Bullets are going to fire on Helgeneth Executioners. Good idea, those guys need to be stopped by the Silver Bullets, otherwise they're just going to tear through the Empire forces. But the Empire is doing a good job at breaking through the High Elves flank, and they have to do this. They have to hunt down those Dark Shots, especially now that the Murderous Prowess has popped. So now the Dark Elves are unmatched in melee combat, especially when it comes to infantry fights. So any infantry unit the Empire has engaged is now most likely going to die, but the Empire has to fight, hunt down and kill Dark Shots. Sure, they have the Murderous Prowess Frenzy popped, but of course this will be meaningless if the Demigryph Knights can hunt them down. Now there was a bold attempt by the Demigryph Knights to kill down Malekith, but Malekith is still a powerful unit in their own right, but I can see more Demigryph Knights trying to hunt him down, and that could be interesting. If Malekith is killed, the Dark Elves leadership will crumble, and final transmutation is probably going to go down in a second, I imagine, as Balthazar Geld is in the area and popping this down, and indeed final transmutation is down. This is the most crucial engagement. Now of course the Demigryph Knights of halberds, they're going to take a whole lot of damage by being attacked with Dark Shots, so very costly, very risky fight over there by the Empire. And as you can see, there are a bunch of units that the Empire could return to the battlefield, but clearly all players' attention is focused on killing Malekith. Can he be killed? He's taking a huge amount of damage from the Demigryph Knights, who are not breaking. They are about to break, as is Malekith. He's down to 500 HP, even lower. He keeps taking more damage. Demigryph Knights clearly really in their element. Witch Hunter should also be firing, and I imagine what he's firing at. It's hard to say. I don't know who he's firing at, but he needs to be. He's not firing at Malekith. He could have killed him right there. Malekith down to 200 health. Now the Witch Hunter is also focusing down, but down to 34 HP. He's almost dead, running away like the coward he is. He's not a coward, honestly. And now he's almost dead. Now, Balthazar Geld, he's not a melee combatant, but he can fly. He's so fast. He can catch up to Malekith and finish him off. And if he does that, then the Dark Elves will be at a disadvantage, because right now the balance of power is creeping in the Dark Elves' favor. They have killed most of the frontline units for the Empire, and the Empire needs to give ground. They need to protect the Silver Bullets if possible, which are now killed and gone. But the Empire needs to engage the enemy ranged forces and just wait and kill this blasted Malekith. Malekith is still there, still fighting. Accusation has been popped on him. He's still fighting, he's still alive with his regenerating health. And, well, he does want to come back, and he's dead. Malekith has finally been killed. He should have not returned. I don't know why the Dark Elves sent Malekith back. He could have just run away and continued running away. But maybe it was just too little too late. And oh no, what is happening over here? Balthazar Geld is engaging against the enemy army archers, and wow, this is a good idea on paper. He's being peppered by the Dark Riders with repeated crossbows that can just murder Balthazar. There's little he can do. He needs to run, and the Empire has very little left on the ground. As the middle engagement was going on, the Dark Elves did what they do best. They obliterated the enemy infantry forces. The Empire needs to regroup. They still have some units on the ground, and maybe those Demigryph Knights can return. There are only 5 models left, but Demigryph Knights are always, you know, a threat to deal with. Balthazar Geld, maybe he can get a few spells off as well, but he needs to run. He cannot engage the enemy archers like this. The Witch Hunter, he is doing just fine, I suppose. but the Empire needs to regroup and reform, and the High Elves are... sorry, not High Elves, Dark Elves, I'm very sorry to all you Dark Elves watching this video. The Dark Elves, they're doing just fine, they're trying to pinpoint the enemy units as quickly as possible, and this is most likely a done game, even though the Demigryph Knights, they're coming back, but now that the Empire forces have been engaged and they are now rampaging, I don't believe there's anything that can turn this game around for the Empire. The Dark Elves rule the day. I'm quite certain of that by now, and it's just now a question of breaking the remaining units for the Empire. And honestly, the Witch Hunter, he stayed up for the longest amount of time, but it doesn't feel like he did a whole lot. He should have been focusing Malekith a bit more, and I've seen him not doing that. Maybe a bit of targeting issues, this does happen sometimes of course, but this is going to be it. Very fun fight, very good competitive army compositions for both players, so that was a very enjoyable one. But it is now 1-1 for Mist and for Geraldo, so we're gonna go into game number 3. But first, let us analyze the armies for both players. So, Mist, I don't know what else I could say. That's a very good competitive army for units of great swords. Sure, they're not the same as Haganef Executioners, but they're very good for... And with the Demigryph Knights of Habits, everything is just flat out good over there. And the Dark Elves, again, a very fun, interesting, competitive fight. I would like to see more flanking for the Dark Elves, but again, the Empire did a very good job at preventing the Dark Elves from flanking. Of course, at some point, the Empire middle center collapsed due to Haganef Executioners, but that was just a matter of time. Honestly, if Malekith could have been picked up, killed earlier, maybe this would have been a one game for the Empire, but that probably wouldn't have been enough. There was a moment, however, when a lot of the Empire units rallied after running away from the fight. If they were redeployed as soon as possible, it probably would have been a better fight for the Empire, but of course, at that point, both players were focused on fighting around Malekith, so again, not too many, if any, mistakes made by Mist or Geraldo. I mean, Geraldo should not have run Malekith back. That almost cost him the game, but thankfully by this point, the Executioners, there were just no answers to those guys. And I usually am not the one to say this, but maybe a little bit more range options were in store for the Empire, something to deal with the Executioners. That would have been good, but other than that, very fun game, and let's see what happens next time around. Finally, game number 3. This will be the deciding match between Mist, who is leading the Dark Elves, and Geraldo, who is leading the Vampire accounts. And I can already tell that something is clearly off in this matchup, so that's going to be a fun one, but let us start by talking about the Vampire Accounts army first. So, the Vampire Accounts are considered by many competitive players to be the best, or one of the best, factions to players out there in a competitive environment. Very powerful, very difficult to deal with. So first up, we've got 2 units of Black Knights on each flank. Now, Black Knights, they do not nearly have the same reputation as the Blood Knights. Blood Knights are the unit that everybody fears, and a unit that I would probably rather see than Black Knights, but of course Black Knights, they still serve, and they can still serve their purpose as a cavalry to flank the enemy. Next up, we've got a bunch of zombies, so not the most common choice, but again, they are just fun meat shoots to have, although a little bit slow. I don't like using zombies for myself for that very simple reason, but they're very cheap and they can always take the brunt of the enemy attack all for themselves. Next up, we've got a few units of Skeleton Spearmen. It looks like only 2 of those, so a little bit risky. I would maybe like to see more, but of course, as always, the Vampire Counts have a lot of answers against large units because of their Terror Guns. That is amazing response to large units, as well as the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. This is the man that everybody fears, a very powerful lord with a bunch of powerful spells, and of course Invocation of Nehek to heal his allied forces as usual. 2 units of Feobats, they're just there to tie down the enemy. Annoying units. Feobats rarely do anything in combat other than tie the enemy down, but they are very good for that reason. They're very fast. Looks like we've got 1, 2, 3 units of Death Guard. I'm sorry, Grave Guard. I confused them with the Vampire Coast. So yeah, Grave Guard, again, very competitive choice. They can usually be quite cost efficient. And 2 units of Crypt Calls, I don't see them quite as often, but they do have poison attacks that will allow them to weaken their foes, and they're of course regenerating and armor piercing, so good idea against the Dark Elves. Now, the issue is, usually it's the Vampire Counts who have the air superiority, but as you can see right now, already, this is not the case. In this case, it's the Dark Elves who won the air superiority, and they're flying out there to prove that they are better at controlling the air. Usually they're not, but in this case, they certainly have the advantage. So we have Malekith on his Black Dragon. Black Dragon is already very strong in their own right, and this Malekith is also going to be very good. 3 Feral Manticles. Now, Feral Manticles usually not very frequently picked units because of their rampage, because of how hard to control they are. But 3 of them! Now this is a very unusual combo, and this can pay out quite well. One unit of Harpy is very good at tying down the enemy fast flyers or other fast units. And finally, 1 unit of Raven Heralds, which are a Regiment of Renown unique unit. There is no regular version of this unit. You can only get 1 unit of those flying crossbow, repeater crossbow Dark Elves, and they are amazing, honestly. Okay, maybe not the most competitive sometimes, because they're quite vulnerable to everything, and their only advantage is that they're flanked. But Vampire Counts cannot have any ranged units. They have no actual missiles to bring into the fight, so those Raven Heralds should do very well against the Vampire Counts. And finally, we've got 3 units of Sisters of Slaughter. Again, an amazing choice against the Vampire Counts, because the Sisters of Slaughter have insanely good melee defense, the highest melee defense out of all Dark Elf melee units, not melee units, but infantry units. So they're very strong. They have no armor to speak of. They do have dodge, but still they're quite vulnerable to enemy missile fire despite the dodge. But of course, the Vampire Cats have no missiles, so Sisters of Slaughter are still going to perform very well. They have good damage, they have poison attacks. There is 1 unit of High Elves, I'm sorry, Witch Elves, not High Elves, I'm sorry, I keep saying High Elves. But either way, they will perform very well. I like having them. They can tie down the enemy Black Knights in place and allow the Dread Spears to finish the job. So, obviously, on the ground, the Vampire Cats have a clear advantage, but this army is very, very tanky for the Dark Elf standards. They're going to stay on the ground for a very long time. And this is important because flying units, if there are no units on the ground, the flying units take massive leadership penalties until they land, forcing somebody to always have units on the ground. So if those units were wiped out too early, this air superiority advantage for the Dark Elves would be meaningless. But this army will be very difficult to kill, even for the superior Vampire Count forces. So as the first shots are being fired, let's move on to the standard speed. I'm already in love with what is happening. This is an amazing build from Mist right there. So the Felbats are trying to die down the Raven Heralds, and they are faster, so they will be able to do that. But choo-choo, the pain train comes in with the Feral Manticles on the hand, as well as the Harpies to tie down the Felbats. And the Felbats will soon wish they were not here. And this is the first time I have ever seen the Vampire Counts shy away from the aerial battle, as the Terrorgeist and the Black Dragons want to have nothing to do with this army. And, well, as I said, the Felbats quickly dispatched, and the Vampire Cats need to engage as quickly as possible. They have no chance of winning in the air fight. Their best bet is to engage the enemy Dark Elf forces and land on the ground to bait the enemy air forces onto the ground to allow the Skeletal Spearmen and maybe the Black Knights, or actually the Crypt Halls, to fight against the Feral Manticles. Now, they will not perform terribly well, but they will perform alright, and most importantly, Crypt Halls and the Dark Shots will most likely be able to rampage the Feral Manticles, thus tying them to the ground and finally allowing the Terrorgeist and the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord to run into the air. So they need to engage as quickly as possible and land just so that they can fly away while keeping the Feral Manticles on the ground. Right now we can see a flanking attempt by the Black Knights. Of course, that's what they have to do. And the Vampire Cats need to encircle the enemy completely, just to give the enemy leadership massive penalties, because without the enemy units breaking, those Dark Elf units will stay here for a long time, and a Gaze of Malice is going to be a big one. Well, not as big as I thought, but it still did some damage. Graveguard are fairly tanky for the skeleton standards, of course, so they'll stay there for quite some time. And a good breath attack onto another unit of Graveguard. This was way more effective. And the Raven Heralds are firing upon the Crypt Halls. I'd rather see them fire upon the enemy Vampire Dragon Bloodlord. That's Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, I got it mixed up. But now they're engaged by Felbats, and Felbats have a good engagement here, but the Harpies are on the watch duty, and Blood Dragon is already popping his invocation of heck. He is faster than any other flying unit the Dark Elves have, so at the very least he can run away, but the melee units of the Vampire Cats have engaged a chill wind, mostly hitting the Sisters of Slaughter, so that was not very good targeting, unfortunately, for the Dark Elves. The Terrorgeist has no good targets in here, other than, of course, Manticores and the Black Dragon, but he's going to try to... oh, that's very risky. If the Witch Elves can rampage the Terrorgeist can be hunted down and killed on the ground, but again, this could be a possible angle of approach for the Vampire Cats, but oh, this is a mistake. So, the Vampire Cats are all piling in, but as you can see, there's a line, a queue of them trying to get into the front. They need to start encircling the enemy formation to attack them from the back, to give leadership penalties to the Dark Elves armies, which, as you can see right now, some of them have the attack in the rear penalty, but not all of them, and they all need to have these penalties if the Vampire Lord counts want to win this engagement. Now, a bunch of units being rampaged, Crypt Halls, they have taken a beating right there by the Dark Elves forces, and again, Dark Elves doing an amazing job at making sure that the Terrorgeist and the Vampire Lord cannot do anything whatsoever. They're just keeping those units at bay. What can you do in that situation? I mean, like I said, in my opinion, the best bet is for this Vampire Lord to land next to the Crypt Halls and the Skeletal Spearmen and try to rampage the Manticores, because while the Manticores are not rampaged, they can just chase away the enemy Lord until the end of this fight, and there's nothing that can stop them. The Murderous Prowess has popped, and this will buy the Dark Elves some more time. Now, this is all Sisters of Slaughter, they're not doing anything, they need to engage right now. They can fight quite effectively with the Murderous Prowess on. They need to get back into the fray. And okay, Terrorgeist landed, and now that the Feral Manticores landed, those Crypt Horrors and all the Spearmen need to focus down on one Feral Manticore to allow it to be rampaged and hopefully picked apart. But so far, that is not happening. I can see there's some kind of chaos going on, I cannot quite see what it is. We're going to see that in a moment, I suppose. Right now, both players are just in a brutal melee. The Witch Elves are going back into the fight after being routed. Good invocation of the hack being popped, healing those Vampire Cats units. Of course, this is the main strength of the Vampire Lords, being able to heal infinitely, basically. But again, those units, there's a lot of units that do nothing, as you can see. They just stand there and look at the fight, while the Dread Spears and the Witch Elves are holding the line as bravely as they can, doing very good. Even though, of course, they are losing, but they are losing slowly, and this is the key to this fight. And this is why Dark Elves are currently winning. The balance of power is shifting in their favor, as the Feral Manticores are still watch duty, keeping the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord at bay, making sure he does not get anywhere near his army. And the Terrorgeist, he's trying very hard, but he also cannot land. He cannot find any good targets to kill either. And honestly, I think right now the Vampire Lord player is in such a shock that he forgot to micro his Black Knights that just all died, but they have not been cycle charging, and they should have been cycle charging to ensure they deal as much damage as possible. Terrorgeist, okay, Terrorgeist is cycle charging a little bit. Now, of course, he's gonna be attacked by all of those Harpies, Malekith as well. And the Manticores are also on the horizon. Now, those Raven Heroes will be the crossbows. They have no more ammunition, but they can be still used to tie down some of the Vampire Lord Counts units. They should go down and attack the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord in melee to just make sure that the Manticores can catch up to him. Because if he's caught up, then maybe the Manticores can finish him off. But right now that may not be necessary. The Dark Elves are doing great on all fronts. The zombies are crumbling, they're no match to the Red Spears. They're just simple zombies after all. In desperation to move, the Blood Lord lands, tries to fight against Malekith. The Terrorgeist is here as well. All of the Manticores are here. This is a brawl and a half. Nobody can see what is happening other than that there's a lot of blood everywhere in the fight. Some breath attacks being used. Heart piercing has been popped. And this is just a mess, a meat grinder for all in the store. Now the Vampire Counts have routed off the Dark Elves on the flank. They need to now move back in and try to rescue the other flank for the Vampire Counts. There's still a glimmer of hope, but the Vampire Lord is now at very low HP. He can still help, although actually he cannot, he's at his health capacity, and the Terrorgeist is very low, he can be healed up. Terrorgeist needs to run away and gets his invocation of Neheg just as going so he can heal up and maybe be more competitive, but there are very little answers left for Malekith. As you can see, there is a bunch of zombies and the Graveguard still on the field, but now they're crumbling, and this is it. This is all she wrote. Mist is victorious. Wow! That was an amazing fight. Of course, so the undead units will fight until the bitter end, but there's nothing else that can now change the tides of the fight. The tides of the battle. Those zombies are debilitated, they are crumbling, and they're about to fall. This was incredible, very, very well thought and cleverly designed build for Mist right there. I am mighty impressed. This, make no mistake, like this, initially, this seems like an overpowered build against the vampire counts, but I'm not so sure. I think this was a very high risk, high reward build, because Mist made the assumption that the vampire counts would do the usual. Get the Terrorgeist, get the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, try to contest the air superiority while they overwhelm the enemy ground forces with the superior forces. So this build worked because the vampire counts played like the vampire counts oftentimes do. But if the vampire counts did not go for air superiority and instead went for very powerful cavalry, like Blood Knights and more Blood Knights and Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, not riding a Blood Dragon but rather riding just on foot or riding a steed instead of being in the air, this would have been a very difficult nut to crack. Those manticores wouldn't have been as ferocious on the ground as they are in the air. And I think in that, if the vampire counts decided to not bring in flying units, instead bring in ground units, this would have been a tougher fight for the Dark Elves, although they still have, I don't know, this is such a wild build, it could have still been competitive. I want to try it myself next time I play as the Dark Elves. It's very, very good. I love it, I absolutely adore it. It's so brilliant, and let's be honest, there was very little risk. I mean, okay, there was risk, but it was very lucky that the vampire counts are going to use this kind of army setup, because of course the vampire counts also have to account for the Dark Elves' usual strengths, that being elite ground infantry units that are very difficult to deal with, and elite flankers that can just run around the vampire counts' army to deal with them. And for that, the vampire counts were very well prepared. They had a very wide army with a lot of meat on the front to just occupy the enemy front line while everything else gets into position. Black Knights and Phobats to make sure that no flankers can be annoying and pest the main brand of the army, that being the Graveguard and Crypt Horse. And of course, Terrorgeist and Blood Dragon, again, very good choice. So that is a very well thought out build for Geraldo, good against Dark Elves. But, I mean, Mist! That was brilliant! Absolutely amazing. I would not be surprised if I were to see him in the finals after this performance. But, ladies and gentlemen, this was Pangolin Advisor. Thank you very much for watching. That was a very fun fight. I hope you stay tuned and watch some other fights from this tournament. Until next time, I'll see you online.